So today we're going to learn about setting the shutter. Just why would we care about changing the shutter? Action shots. You can do various effects by changing the shutter speeds, and today we're going to try it out, but we need a subject. Quads. Okay, so here's our subject. A quad driving by at a high rate of speed. And here's me taking the photo. The camera on auto selected 1/30th of a second, which is pretty slow. You can see the subject is blurred. This is one method to show action. It's to blur the action. This is called blurred action. Now I'm going to put the camera on shutter priority so I can set the shutter and the camera will set the aperture. And I'm going to speed up the shutter speed, taking a shot at each setting. Here's our original shot again at 1/30th of a second, pretty slow shutter speed. You can see quite a bit of blur. Speeding up the shutter to 1/60th of a second, tad bit better, but not a lot. Still pretty blurry. We still have blurred action. 1/25th of a second, which is twice as fast, still a little bit of blur. 1/250th of a second, starting to get a little bit more crisp. The action is not as blurred. Next we have 1/500th of a second. Now you can see there's very little blur. This is known as stopped action. And here is the subject again at 1/1000th of a second, which is very fast. Again, stopped action. One issue with stopped action is you can't tell if the action stopped or if there is really no action in the first place. Here's an example. In the prior examples, here is our subject, the fast-moving quad. Here's another shot. It looks like our fast shutter speed, stopped action shots. There's no blur. But here is the subject for that shot. Not moving at all. So far, we can blur action or stop action, and it's clear that some subjects do better to be blurred, while some better to be stopped. Let's look at some examples. A fast shutter speed to stop the action worked for this photo, as well as this one. The stopped action shows the individual drops of water. And in this, fast shutter, stopped action, works. In this photo, a slow shutter speed blurred the runner, and this shows the action, as well as in this. If we'd stopped the action, it would not have looked near as good. And in this, a blurred bus based off of a slow shutter speed. So now we've learned to use a slow shutter speed to blur action, and a fast shutter speed to stop action, and seen some examples of when to use either. In our stopped action photo, everything is clear, the background, the subject, and the foreground. This is different from the blurred action photo, where the subject's blurred, but the background is in focus. Another way to show action is to apply motion blur to the background by panning. In the prior pictures, the camera is steady, and the subject moved in front of it. Again, you can see, looking at the camera's not moving, the subject is. When you pan, you're trying to have the camera move along with the subject, and thus the subject is not moving in relation to the camera. The subject has no action in this case. What is moving in relation to the camera is the background, so you can blur the background. So panning, with a relatively slow shutter speed of 1/60th of a second, you can see the subject is clear and the background is blurred. Panning at 1/125th of a second, a little bit faster, the background's not as blurred, subject is still clear. Panning with 1/500th of a second, a very quick shutter speed, everything is in focus again. This is because 1/500th of a second stops action. What was in action? The background, since it was moving in relation to the camera. Thus, 1/500th of a second stops the action of the background, and again, everything is in focus. What does this mean? This means that with panning, you want a slow shutter speed, so that the subject is clear, yet the background is blurred. The shutter speed has to be fast enough so that you don't have motion blur from holding the camera, but again slow enough so that the background is blurry. Here's a nice example of panning. Background's blurred, subject's clear. And another nice example. Camera's moving with the subject, background's blurred. In summary, we've learned that we can show action in multiple ways. We can either use a slow shutter speed to blur action, a fast shutter speed to stop action, or a slow shutter speed and panning to blur the background. So that's why setting the shutter speed matters, and what you can do with it. So set your cameras on shutter priority and get out there and do it.